Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel for another episode of the Routes Learning series recorded within Train Simulator. In this episode we're going to be taking a journey along the Peterborough to Cambridge route, which is available from Alan Thomson Simulation. I quite like how this route has been put together, and although I'm not that familiar with the route in real life, it's really quite a nice route to drive, and it's also a really easy route to learn to drive without the HUD, as there's not too many speed changes and there's a very limited number of stops along the way. This is the first of several videos that I'm hoping to record on Alan Thomson Simulation routes in the coming weeks, and the service that I'm driving on this video today is going to be train 1 Lima 30, which is the 0722 AM cross-country service from Birmingham New Street through to Cambridge, and of course we're joining the train on its journey here at Peterborough, departing Peterborough at 9:19 AM. Stops along the way will include March, Ely, and finally Cambridge, with a total journey distance of around 45 miles. The train for this journey is a Class 170 Turbo Star diesel multiple unit, which is a train that I realise hasn't actually featured on this channel all that often. The Class 170s have been in service since the 31st of May 1999 and were constructed by Adtrans and Bombardier Transportation between 1998 and 2005. A total of 139 Class 170 units were produced, with 9 of them later being converted to Class 168s and 11 of them being converted to Class 171s. They are formed of 2 or 3 coaches per unit, and the unit that I'm driving on this video today is going to be a 3-coach unit. The length of each 3-coach unit is just under 71 metres, or just over 232 feet, with a unit weight of around 133 tonnes. There is a 13-litre 6-cylinder MTU engine under each coach, each with a power output of 422 horsepower, giving a total power output for this unit of 1,266 horsepower. These trains also have a maximum speed of 100 miles per hour, though the maximum speed limit for this journey is going to be 75 miles per hour. Okay, so I've now jumped into the cab of the Class 170. I've already run through the setup procedure because we're joining this train in the middle of its journey, so it seems a little bit unrealistic to be reinserting the master key, setting up the cab with the AWS self-test sequence and so on, and setting up the headlights, as that would already be set up in reality. But I just wanted to quickly talk about the cab controls here. As you can see, this is a fairly standard British train cab. So on the left-hand side here, you've got the reversing handle, which is currently in the neutral position, and then next to that we've got the combined traction and brake controller. So on the Class 170s, you've actually got 7 notches of power beyond the neutral position. Just move it up to neutral now. So as you pull it towards you now, you've got 7 notches of power. When departing away from a station, I'm generally going to go into notch 3, and then shortly after that we'll jump up to notch 5, and then when we're doing between sort of 10 to 15 miles per hour, I will then increase the power all of the way to notch 7 or full power. Pushing away from you, you've got a standard 3-step brake, and I try not to go above step 2 when braking, and so generally steps 1 and 2 will give you a nice smooth brake force, but in addition to that, it's good to not go into full service braking so that you've got some extra brake force if required, for example if the track was slippery or something, and also just for passenger comfort. So up here we've got the DRA, the driver reminder appliance. I'm going to leave that on until departure, even though the signal ahead is showing a clear proceed aspect. Then in front of us we've got a nice, very easy to read speedometer measured in miles per hour, with the red line marking the maximum speed for this train of 100 miles per hour. Over on the right hand side of the cab here we've got the brake gauges. So it's the needle on the right hand side is the brake cylinder pressure gauge, which shows how hard the brakes are applied. Now whilst the doors are open like they are now, it's always going to be in the maximum position, which is at 5, but when you do release the brakes, then that will drop all the way to 0, and then as you apply the brakes, then the higher that needle is pointing, then the harder the brakes are applied. Continuing further around the cab, you've got the horn control here, which is a 2-tone horn controllable with the space bar and the B key. Unfortunately with the Class 170 there's no openable windows, so I won't be able to open the windows on this journey today. Continuing around the cab, the only other thing I can think of to mention is the AWS reset button, which you can see in front of you there, and of course is controllable with the Q key on the keyboard. So now we've had a look at the cab and just a basic look at the controls here, let's take another look at the train as we depart and head out towards March, our first stop, and onwards to Cambridge. As we depart away from Peterborough here, the starting speed limit is 30 miles per hour, with around 15 miles to go to our first stop at March. And at this point I've shut off the power at around 25 miles per hour because we're about to go on a short, quite steep downward gradient as we dive under the East Coast main line. So we're now about to enter a 1 in 84 downward gradient. We're going to gain speed quickly up towards 30 miles per hour, and I'm probably going to need to use the brakes to control the speed. Now we're doing about 30. I'm just going to apply notch 1 of braking, or step 1 should I say of braking, just to bring our speed down a little bit to ensure that we don't break the speed limit here. And the East Coast main line is crossing over us at this overbridge just here. Also at this overbridge is where the gradient is going to level out, and you're going to find that for most of this route the gradient is level. There's a few slight changes, but it's mostly a very level, flat route. The speed limit here is now going up to 75 miles per hour, so I'm just going to wait just a moment and we can accelerate just as we reach the point on the opposite track. So now just going to go into full power all of the way up to 75 miles per hour, and then once we reach 75, to maintain the speed on this route, for almost all of the journey in fact, you need to go between notches 1 and 2 of power. So in notch 2 you're going to accelerate up just slightly above 75, it's just accelerating very slowly, and in notch 1 you're decelerating very slowly. So just go between the two to maintain the speed as close to 75 as you can. Getting our speed up quite nicely now, up to 70 miles per hour. I'm going to I'll get my words right in a second. I'm going to start cutting the power back in a moment, just to ensure that we don't break the speed limit along here. So now down to notch 1 of power as we're doing 75, and then once we're down to sort of 72, 73, I'll bring us back up to notch 2 to accelerate back up towards 75 once again. I've had a few people recently asking me what the spec of the computer is that I'm using, and of course I don't talk about it in every video, but just to answer that question, the computer that I'm currently using is an Intel Core i9-10900K. I do have that connected to an all-in-one water cooling system so that I can get some boost overclock out of it, as Train Simulator is much more bound to the CPU than the graphics card. So the faster that the CPU can run, especially on single-core performance, then the better Train Simulator generally runs. I've got 16 gigabytes of Kingston HyperX DDR4 RAM, and the graphics card that I'm using is currently an NVIDIA RTX 3070. I'm also running Train Simulator off an SSD because I find that it performs much better and you get much less load stutter than if you're playing it on a hard drive. So we just passed the whistle board there. Just to mention, I often do miss the whistle posts in my videos, as I'm sure you're aware if you've been following my channel in the past. So I'll try and sound the horn at all of them that I actually notice. But I'm pretty sure there's going to be a couple that I miss out on. As we round this left-hand curve here, we're now coming up towards Whittlesea Station, the first station out of Peterborough, and at Whittlesea Station we've got around 9 miles to go to March. And the Morpeth board just here, we can completely ignore that, as that is not a speed limit that applies to us. At this signal, with a crossing immediately after it, we've got around 7.5 miles to go. As I was saying earlier, I do like how this route's been put together. I think that it's quite realistic based upon what I do know about the route, although I'm not too familiar with it in reality. But equally, I do feel it's slightly flat and featureless, and that's not the fault of the route creators. I think that's more just the way that this route is in real life in this part of England. Past the signal there, crossing a canal, we've now got a left-hand curve here. At the end of this left-hand curve, when we pass a signal box, then we've got around 5 miles to go. signal box is just coming up there, marking just over 5 miles to March Station. So we've probably got about around 2 to 3 miles to go to the next landmark that I'm looking out for, which is going to be some wind turbines next to some houses. And at that point I need to start preparing to slow down for a speed limit of 40 miles per hour, which comes into force before March Station. You can see the wind turbines there and the houses coming up on the right hand side. So now I'm going to shut off the power to allow the train to coast at this point. There is a Morpeth board warning for the upcoming 40 limit, but I feel it's slightly too close to the limit itself to slow down comfortably in step 2 of braking. So I can see that warning just coming up now, and I'm already going to apply step 1 of braking to bring our speed down, and I'll increase that to step 2 as we pass the warning. There's actually a 55 mile per hour speed limit that comes into force just before the 40 as well, so we need to ensure that we're down to 55 in time. So I've cut the braking back to step 1 as we were slowing down perhaps slightly too early. And there's the 55 limit, and the 40 is coming up in a moment. So I've gone back up to step 2 just to bring that speed down. And we're now down to 40 miles per hour in time, so I'm just going to allow the train to coast at this point. And then I will shortly start braking for March Station, just as we see a route diverge off to the left here. A rather sharp set of points with a 10 mile per hour speed limit, and you can certainly see why the speed limit's 10 miles per hour around that curve. So now let's just apply some light braking to bring our speed down. We should see the platforms at March Station coming up in a moment, and there they are just ahead. So here at March I want to stop at the S sign at the end of the platform. Might be slowing down slightly too early there, so I've cut back to step 1 of braking. And you can see that S sign coming up, which is right by the signal there. we should now be stopping in just about the right place. Departing away from March, the speed limit is 40 miles per hour with just over 15.5 miles to go to the next stop, which is Ely. One thing I noticed on this particular journey, because we're not stopping at any of the smaller stations in between, we've just got these 3 stops that are actually almost equally spaced apart, so it's roughly 15 miles between each stop. So now we've reached 40 miles per hour. I've just shut off the power to allow the train to coast until we're able to accelerate further. I only just did that in time, I think. We might have even hit 41 for a moment there. The speed limit's now increasing further to 60 miles per hour. Speed limit is further increasing back up to the maximum line speed of 75 miles per hour, and of course we didn't reach 60 before we passed the 75 post, so you don't have to worry about cutting the power or anything to ensure you don't break the speed limit. I've just pulled the power back to notch 2 as we're approaching 75 miles per hour, and I'll pull it back to notch 1 again in a moment. So the next landmark that I'm looking out for is going to be the next station that we pass through, which is Manea. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. I had to Google the pronunciation because I looked at the spelling, which is Manea, and I was just like, that's going to trick me. I thought it might be Manea or something like that, but no, apparently it's Manea. And at Manea station, we've got just under 10 miles to go to Ely. So I believe we're just coming up on Manea station now. We have had reports that 1 Lima 03, the 707 Mansfield Woodhouse to Norwich, has failed just outside of Ely. It's currently sat at signal Charlie Alpha 288 on the up line. You will therefore perform a wrong line movement and will be crossed back over just after Charlie Alpha 290 signal. So that's warning us that just as we reach Ely Junction, or Ely North Junction I believe it might be, that we're going to end up being routed onto the wrong track into Ely Station, as there's a failed train there. So we're about to cross a girder bridge, and as we cross this girder bridge we've got around 8.5 miles to go to Ely. And then 3/4 of a mile from that bridge is another girder bridge that we're crossing, so that will be 7.75 miles to go to Ely at that point. At this crossing with the hut on the right hand side there, we've got 5.75 miles to go. We've now got 4 3/4 miles to go at the crossing that we just passed. So it's the second crossing after the first one with the hut on the right hand side, and we've got around 1.3 miles to go to an upcoming 60-mile/hour speed limit. So I'm going to shut off the power in a moment and allow the train to coast. Going to pass a 60-mile/hour speed warning in a moment. And as we do so, I'll brake shortly after that to ensure that we're down in speed in time. To apply the brakes, just step 1 for now, just before this overbridge here. The 60 limit comes into force immediately after the upcoming signal. So now just going to allow the train to coast at 60 miles/hour. We will get a warning for an upcoming 50-mile/hour speed limit very soon, which is just over half a mile from the limit itself. As the speed limit dropped to 60 miles/hour, I forgot to mention we at that point had 3.5 miles to go to Ely Station. To keep an eye on the signals here now. I can see we've got a double yellow, and I know that the signals along this section are actually quite close together, so I'm already going to start applying the brakes just to ensure that we do slow down in time. So this means that the signal currently guarding Ely North Junction is showing a red aspect. We've now got the warning for the upcoming 50-mile/hour speed limit. So I've released the braking for a moment, and I'm just going to wait until I can see what aspect the next signal's displaying, and I can see it already displaying a single yellow, so I'm now going to apply step 2 braking to bring our speed off a bit more, as I know that the next following signal is fairly close to this one, and we certainly don't want to end up spadding. Reduce the braking back to step 1. I can now see the signal coming up ahead, that red signal, back up to step 2 of braking. I don't really want to cross over the AWS ramp at any faster than around 20 miles/hour. To 15. I've just released the brakes momentarily, and I'll start reapplying them as we get closer to the signal and bring us to a stop just in front of the signal. So yeah, due to the wrong line working, we've just got single track going into and out of Ely at the minute, with that failed train blocking the other one, so I've just got to wait until that line is clear before I can proceed into Ely Station. The 50-mile/hour speed limit that I mentioned a moment ago comes into force just after this signal, right before the junction. So we've come to a stop nicely in front of the signal there, and now just got to wait for the line to clear. So I'm going to go into step 3 of braking and turn on the driver reminder appliance, just to make sure that I don't accidentally pull away, or in real life certainly, just to make sure a driver doesn't accidentally pull away against a red signal. Okay, so the signal's now jumped to green. I'm going to turn off the driver reminder appliance and get moving into Ely Station. The speed limit is now dropping to 50 miles/hour at this point, and the next speed change will be a drop in the speed limit down to 35 miles/hour shortly before Ely Station. It seems that I might have started moving there in notch 4 unintentionally. I was intending to start moving in notch 3. So that 25 mile per hour speed limit there is for the junction just here going to the right, rather than the junction that we're about to cross going to the right onto the opposite track. So the speed limit on those points was 50 miles per hour. I'm still accelerating up towards 50 at the minute. Immediately after crossing the junction, the speed limit's actually increased to 60 miles per hour on this track, although I'm going to shut off the power and allow the train to coast at 50 in preparation for slowing down for the upcoming 35 limit. Actually see the warning for the 35 limit on the opposite track just there. So I'm now pulling the power back into idle, allow the train to coast, and I'm going to apply the brakes in a moment just as we reach the rear of the signal that you can see coming up just there. So now let's start braking and slow down to 35 in time. We're now down to 35 miles per hour. Well, the speed limit's 35 for multiple units, as it said on the speed post there, and it's 20 miles per hour for all other train types. I think just ahead there on the opposite track you can see the failed train, which has caused this single line running and caused a slight delay on the service here. And we're about to cross back onto the correct track, as you can see with the feather indicator on the signal just there. After we've crossed over onto the correct track and we enter Ely Station, the speed limit actually increases to 50 miles per hour. You can now see the platform at Ely coming up, so I'm just going to put on the brakes now. The speed limit's going up to 50, as you can see just before the station. And we need to stop at the four-car stop sign, which is around halfway along the platform roof. See the four-car stop sign there just at the end of the building, so I'm just bringing our speed down now, and hopefully we should be stopping in just about the right place. Departing away from Ely, the speed limit is 50 miles per hour with just over 14.5 miles to go to the next and final stop on this journey, which will be Cambridge. You may notice we're now running under overhead wires, so this is the electrified route that runs from King's Lynn right down to London King's Cross, and I'm actually planning to cover that in a video in the not too distant future in a class 387, driving all of the way from King's Lynn to King's Cross, which takes the best part of 2 hours actually to complete. We're now coming up on an increase in the speed limit to 75 miles per hour. I believe the junction that we just passed a moment ago is actually the route towards London Liverpool Street. point onwards there's absolutely no speed changes to worry about until right before Cambridge Station. Pulled us back to notch 2 as we're approaching 75 miles per hour, once again needing to go between notches 1 and 2 to maintain the speed. Mentioned a moment ago about wanting to do the King's Lynn to King's Cross video. A couple of other videos that I'm thinking of doing in the very near future include Ramsgate to Victoria in a Class 375, as it would be great to cover this the new Chatham main line as it's been done, and possibly also in the not too distant future Victoria to Dover Priory, or maybe just the Faversham section, so Faversham to Dover Priory in a Class 465, as they have been used along that route. I'm not sure if they still are, but I've certainly travelled in a Class 465 along that route in the past. I'm also considering doing the Chat Moss route from Alan Thomson Simulation in a Class 802 in Trans-Pennine livery. I mentioned that I'm hoping to, at some point, see if I can cover the entire West Coast main line from Glasgow Central through to London Euston. I also would like to look at doing Holyhead to Crewe, as I previously didn't have the Holyhead extension to the North Wales coastal route, and now that's been re-released. I'm looking to try and cover the entire route there, all of the way from Holyhead to Crewe. And also, potentially, looking at Birmingham New Street to Liverpool Lime Street, or possibly the opposite direction in a Class 350. I will look at doing some Train Sim World 2 videos as well at some point, but because I'm recording them in 4K at 60 frames a second, it takes much longer to edit and render the video, and my time is somewhat limited trying to get some videos done on my days off between blocks of shifts at work, as I'm still working for the ambulance service at the minute, and we work 12-hour shifts day and night, though I do actually get quite a lot of days off to make up for it. When you're on shift at work, it's literally all you do is work, go home, sleep, get up, go back to work, and I generally don't do more than 4 shifts in a row, although sometimes I've been known to end up having to do more. Just to add to all of those videos I just mentioned, there'll probably be some others that I'll just drop in there randomly as well. I'm not giving you any particular order and saying that this is the next video and so on, because I never quite know what I'm going to record next. It depends what I feel like driving at the time, and it may be that I find another route or journey that I'm like, oh, I'd just like to drive that today, and I might record that. But certainly I want to get a few videos up on this comeback. I said I don't know how long I'm going to be back on YouTube for. It could be a short time, it could be a long time. We'll just have to see what happens for now. Next landmark that I'm looking out for is going to be Waterbeach Station, and at that point we've got around 5.5 miles to go to Cambridge. As we round this right-hand curve here, we're now approaching Waterbeach Station. So we're now past this signal. There's a crossing with a bungalow on the left, and then coming up ahead is an overbridge, and at the overbridge we've got around 3 miles to go to Cambridge. Now we're shortly going to be coming up on Cambridge North Station, and at Cambridge North we've got around 2 miles to go. What I'm looking out for now is a warning for an upcoming 35 mph speed limit. The warning's actually 2/3 of a mile from the limit itself. There's also going to be a 15 mph speed limit very quickly after the 35, as we're going to be crossing a junction to the right hand side, so I need to aim to slow down to 15 rather than 35. Shut off the power and allow the train to coast. I'm just looking out for that warning board now. You can also see we've got a double yellow signal aspect just ahead. So we've just passed the warning. I'm now going to apply the brakes up to step 2. The double yellow signal is indicating that we're going into the bay platform actually at Cambridge. As long as this is double yellow, we are cleared all of the way into Cambridge Station. I noticed we've got some very bad lag just here for a moment. This happened on my practice run as well. The 35 mph speed limit comes into force immediately before the next signal now, and the 15 limit comes into force at the junction immediately after the next signal. I reduced the braking momentarily as I thought we might be slowing down a bit too quick, but now I'm back up to step 2 of braking to ensure that we slow down in time. So just past the 35 speed post, now down to 15, releasing the brakes and going to allow the train to coast from here. And you can see the 15 mile per hour speed limit is as we're crossing over to the right hand track here. We're going to be, as I said, signalled into the bay platform. So it really is the end of the line for us here. Just realised that sounded like I'm speaking doom and gloom. It's the end of the line for us all. No, it's just the end of the track here. So I want to slow down to no more than 10 miles per hour as we enter the platform, and then gradually bring us to a stop after the buffer stops have disappeared below the front of the window there. So I've just been fanning the brakes there between off and step 1, just to try and bring us to a smooth stop in front of the buffers. I'm waiting until they've disappeared, and now we should be stopping here, if I brake now, in just about the right place. And so here we are, arrival at Cambridge. Thank you very much for watching this video. I do hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, then please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, for the latest channel updates, you can find me on Facebook with a link to my Facebook page in the video description. If you'd like to donate to me on Patreon, then please visit my Patreon page with the link to that also in the video description. If you're interested in my photography, then please head over to PTG Travelling on Instagram, and I'll put that handle in the video description. And finally, I've got a good friend in Poland who's doing some artwork with string, nothing related to trains, but he needs some support right now. So I said to him that I would also put his Instagram handle in the video description for anyone who'd like to check out his artwork. Anyway, once again, thank you for watching.